Welcome or welcome back to my channel for the 8th in a series of videos about intuition in the Human Design chart. And what we're tracking are all the different kinds of intuition that Human Design helps us to see and to know, and it reveals it to us and illuminates it for us in such incredible ways that our culture certainly doesn't teach us. And today we're going to talk about emotions and the emotional solar plexus. Let's go ahead and get started. Emotional sensitivity. Have you ever been told that you were too sensitive? Yeah, I know, especially us women, right? We get taught that a lot. And it's really unfortunate, of course, right? Because emotional sensitivity is actually a superpower. And it's a great skill for people who are, healers and counselors and therapists and coaches and really anyone who works with clients, especially in the healing arts and transformational fields. But really, it's great for teachers and financial advisors and personal trainers and, and then also for like musicians and artists, dancers, singers, right? Because this helps us get attuned to the emotional tone of an environment, of a situation, and the emotional tone of a person or a group of people. And that sensitivity gives you the ability to tune in energetically and receive nonverbal, nonlinear, non-rational information about whatever is occurring through that emotional sensitivity. Now, here's the thing. When you're clear and in command of your own energy field, you can interface with someone else's energy and be sensitive to it, okay, without taking it on into your own energy field. Now, I know that that's probably sacrilege in the human design world, where we're all taught that just automatically we're around other people and where we're open and they're defined, we'll pick up their energy and amplify it. Like that's kind of the standard traditional human design way of thinking about how we interact energetically. That isn't my experience. And I have been working with energy for a long time, and I'm also very somatic and very kinesthetic. And so I'm very aware of how energy works in my body and also in my auric field. And part of what I want to share with you today is an understanding that you do not have to be at the mercy, and this is true for anywhere where you're open, okay? You do not have to just be at the mercy of other people's energy the way that you often get taught in human design. You don't. And you also have to learn how to do that, and you have to develop certain skills. So we're going to get to that a little bit later on in this video. I personally am not an advocate for taking on other people's energy, taking on energies that are from outside of us, even like what people do with Reiki, where they bring Reiki through. And I was taught to do this. I've been trained as a Reiki practitioner. Bring Reiki through your body and then bring it out your hands. I don't even necessarily think that's a great thing, because you really want to have command over your own field, and you want your field to just contain your own energy and your own codes of light and your own spiritual information, right? You don't want it to be full of other energies and other people's stuff, and even energies from things that are non-human. Okay. Now, you may choose at certain points to be influenced by energies that are not yours. So this human design experiment, the way I teach it, is how do we strengthen our own energy field so that we're coherent and we're harmonized and we're in integrity with ourselves, and we're also protected, but we're also sensitive and aware and compassionate and even empathetic. And how do we do all of that at the same time? Well, in the human design system, there is an entire energy center called the Emotional Solar Plexus, which a lot of times people think, oh, that's where emotions are located in the human design chart. That's not really accurate because there are many different places where there are emotions in the human design chart. And in this very series, I have done other videos like on the G center, which was the last one, which we think of as the heart, right? Which is the center for love and lovability. And then it's connected to the will center, which is the center for courage, which I think of it as an emotional energy. Then I also did another video on the spleen, and the spleen has all of this fear as a part of it. So it's actually a lot of different places where what we think of as emotions or feelings can show up in the human design chart. But with the emotional solar plexus, it is part of the evolution of our human energy field according to the story of human design. And it is a power center. It's an engine or a motor. And so it is a place where energy is built and is available. And when we think about emotional energy, we go, yeah, emotions can be extremely strong. Some of the most strong energy that we experience is emotional energy. The way that I think about it in human design, and there's a few things. So one is that this is the creative power of emotional energy, right? You've probably heard, certainly Abraham Hicks talks about this, but they're not the only ones, about how when you get emotionally involved, ideally in a positive way for something that you want to bring into your life, that's when you become more of a magnetic force to bring that into your life. Now, the same thing can be true of the things you're afraid of, right? Is if you're really afraid of things, then you can become a magnetic to the things that you're really afraid of because emotional energy is creative. It's very, very powerful and it is magnetic. And so this is why we really want to be in command of our emotional energy. Now, I want to make a distinction here between command and control. So for me, command is what we have when we have developed our sovereign self. We're sovereign of our being. We're sovereign of our energy field. We're sovereign of our physical form. And we know how to restore ourselves and nurture ourselves, take care of ourselves. And we know how to work with a powerful energy like our emotional energy. But that's different than suppressing your emotions or rejecting your emotions or judging your emotions or really trying to clamp down on things to try to be, to control things, which usually is more of the shadow expression, and it's typically coming out of a fear state. So command is not coming out of fear. Command is coming out of this deep sense of the power within that you get from developing your sovereign self, right? And so you're just in command of your energy, but you're not trying to foist it on other people. You're not trying to manipulate anything. You're not trying to control things, right? But you are in command. So in addition to this kind of creative energy of the emotional solar plexus, it also creates an emotional tone. Now, there's a distinction between people who have this colored in their chart, and it's known as defined, and people who have it open in their chart, and it's white. And so for the different it's about 50-50, and we experience the center differently depending on whether we're defined or not. Now, just briefly, people who are defined, and mostly what I'm going to talk about is people who have it undefined, because this is where the intuitive energy lies more. But for people who do have it defined, they're going to have an emotional wave. They're going to have some kind of emotional tone most of the time. Now, I do have a video about emotional authority and about the emotional wave and the emotional tone and all that. So I encourage you to go and check that out if you're interested in that, especially if you're emotionally defined. But even just, it's good for us to know, even if you're undefined, because you'll understand your friends and your family who are emotionally defined better than you will right now. So there is this sense that the emotional solar plexus, particularly when it's defined, creates emotional tone. Okay, so it's kind of a quality of emotional energy. It's a frequency, if you will, or a vibration. And so part of what we want to be able to do, all of us, whether it's defined or open, is to always be working on clearing any stagnant emotions that we have, any more energy that we have, and always lifting up the quality of our emotional tone. Because when we do that, then we are going to be much more powerful to attract into our life things to respond to, or invitations, or even creative impulses of things that we want to engage with in life. And that's going to be true for all of us, because we all have emotional tone. It's just that for those of us who are emotionally undefined, when we're on our own, like me, I'm emotionally undefined. When I'm on my own, and when I'm not responding to a situation or a person or a movie or something, right? I'm not receiving external stimuli, and I'm also not chewing over a conversation that I had earlier, then I'm pretty neutral emotionally. I'm just kind of chill, right? And so this is one of the qualities of an open emotional solar plexus, or potentially. But let's dig into when you have an open emotional solar plexus, because in this series on intuition, it's people who have this who really get the intuitive quality of what the emotional solar plexus can bring us. Now, let me just say here that in traditional human design, open emotional solar plexus and openness in general, but especially an open emotional solar plexus and an emotional G center, are considered liabilities. Okay, they're considered a place where you're at the mercy of other people's emotional energy, or with the G center, you're at the mercy of other people's identities. And that you don't really have any control over it. Okay, that you're just at the mercy of it. But you do. This is my experience. But you do. But you need to learn how to do that. Okay, and we'll get to that. But being open in your emotional solar plexus makes you especially sensitive, yes, to other people's emotions, and especially emotionally defined people, but also even to people who are emotionally undefined but are having emotions. And you can also be very sensitive to people who are emotionally defined who are suppressing their emotions, okay, or they're denying their emotions. And this shows up for kids a lot, because kids get made wrong. This happened to me. Get made wrong for picking up their parents' emotional energy and amplifying it, or even their siblings or the people around them. I know for me, I was angry a lot as a kid, and I wasn't really, I don't even think I knew why. I realized many years later that I was picking up my parents' suppressed anger that they weren't giving voice to and they weren't processing, right? They didn't have any, they lived in a time where you didn't do that. Like, you didn't really know about emotions. You certainly didn't know how to process like the heavier emotions. Usually people just kind of, like yelled or something and then waited for it to pass, right? So I'm not blaming them for that, but maybe you had this experience if you're emotionally open, or other people, or you might even see it in your own kids if they're emotionally open. So pay attention to that, because it can be a lot to experience that, particularly as a young person. And we don't get taught to understand, right? We get taught to suppress and to reject and to distrust our emotions and not to honor and understand them. So then, we grow up and we don't know how to work with them, and we don't get their value. One of the things that we need to be able to do, for example, is distinguish between emotional triggers, which is what arises when a situation through association brings up an unhealed wound, right? Or unhealed trauma, right? And so something happens, your mind, your subconscious immediately connects it to something that happened in the past where you still feel wounded. And the next thing you know, you have this big emotional response, which typically is out of magnitude with what's going on, right? You've done it. I've done it. Everybody's done it. We witnessed it in other people, right? So we need to be able to distinguish between an emotional trigger, right, versus a simple and pure emotional response in real time to something that is happening. Like when you find out, somebody has lost their dog, or their house got flooded, or whatever, you have a genuine feeling of empathy and sadness, and you might have a tear, and that's an appropriate thing to have. Now, to fall apart and go screaming and yelling and getting really angry, and that's not necessarily an appropriate response, right? It's out of magnitude with what's going on. So you want to be able to distinguish between emotional triggers and a genuine emotion, which you do want to value, but then also you want to be able to distinguish between what's genuinely yours and what's someone else's. Right? Because I had to really learn how to do that, because I was in the habit of picking up and amplifying these emotions that my parents weren't expressing. So you want to develop your skills in this area so that, number one, you can understand yourself better, right? You can know what's yours, what's not yours. You can know what's a trigger, what's not, what's a genuine expression, right? Because the emotional landscape is complicated, right? There's a lot of different components to it. It's not really a simple thing. So getting more in touch with what's really truly yours can help a lot. And you want to know when your emotional energy could be harmful or manipulative to somebody else versus when it's a pure expression. Like if it's anger, right? If there's something that's wanting to come out and can be harmful to someone else. But you want to be able to be free to fully experience your emotions also in ways that are beneficial to you and to the people around you and not harmful. Like you want to be able to experience your enthusiasm, right? And your ecstasy and your delight in things. But you also want to be able to experience genuine grief or sadness or compassion, right? You want to have a full range of your emotional palette, right? And then, of course, you don't want to take on other people's emotional energy when you don't want to. And it can also be a really delightful and juicy thing to do. Like I know being at a concert this summer with 20,000 other people at one of our all-time favorite bands, the energy in that space was so high, and I rode that energy for days because I took it in and amplified it. So you want to be able to do that when the time is right. So some of the challenges for the emotionally open person can come from conditioning, right? So one thing is that you can become a people pleaser or a peacemaker or codependent to try to keep everybody stable, to try to keep the energy calm, everybody happy. That can lead to placating and fawning, over giving, right? Because you had a history when you were a young person of taking on emotional energy and amplifying it, anger, disapproval, criticism, right? And it felt horrible. So you want to make sure that doesn't ever happen. Or you can become avoidant, which is as soon as the energy starts to rise and you start to even be like there's intensity. And this for some people can happen with even joyful intensity, but often it's with intensity that feels, like distress or something like that. And you're like, I don't like the way that feels. So you leave, right? You leave either physically or energetically, right? Emotionally, you're just gone, right? And so that's avoidant. These are the kind of people who tend to leave relationships when they start to get difficult because they have a hard time with that period when, things start to, right? And you have to figure things out. And sometimes there's intensity in there. The avoidants tend to get out of there, whereas the people pleasers tend to just kind of try to get everything to calm down again, right? But either way, you're not really being honest about what's going on, right? And you're just energetically reacting. The other thing that can happen is you can become super emotional because you're accustomed to this amplified emotional energy. And you can become habituated to things like dopamine and cortisol and adrenaline that get released with strong emotions, right? That aren't always pleasant, right? And so all of these different conditioning challenges, these are all ways that we have responded to having an emotional solar plexus, but it gums up our intuition. It gets in the way of our intuition because what happens is these emotional patterns get triggered. Right? They're programmed responses and programmed ways of being in relationship with self and others. And so, we just do it kind of automatically. Another thing you want to watch for is habitually riding the emotional energy of other people. I mean, after all, it is a power center, right? It has fuel in it. And if you are open emotionally, you might ride on other people's, particularly if you're not a sacral being, like if you're a manifestor or a projector or a reflector, because you don't have that really strong sacral, you might really enjoy picking up, energy from the other motors and amplifying them. And that definitely can happen with emotional energy. Even given all of that, your open emotional solar plexus can become a huge ally, a superpower even in terms of your intuition. And you do have to do some things in order for that to be the case. So one is that it's about letting go any old suppressed emotions that you had. That you suppressed it because, you were made wrong for it at some point in your life. So people who are emotionally open can do that just as easily as people who are emotionally defined. So you do want to be able to release that old stagnant emotional energy. And when you do, you're going to feel so much energy become available to you because it takes a lot of energy to kind of, keep your emotions suppressed. And when you stop doing that, it's like, wow. all of a sudden more energy becomes available to you. You also need to develop strong, clear, yet gentle, not with spikes, but boundaries. Okay, boundaries around your auric field and filling your auric field with your own soul light and your own soul energy. This is the reason that I offer so many different energy practices here on my channel, inside of my virtual retreat center, when I work with clients, because when we do these energy practices, they help us to relieve all kinds of old emotions, just stagnant energy, belief systems that don't fit with us anymore. Just different ways that we've had constellations of energies get located, in your belly or your heart or your neck or your back or whatever it is, right? When you move energy, all of that's going to break up and it's going to be released, and it's going to make you much, much clearer in terms of your intuition. Now, I do have a number of videos. You can go and check out this playlist that have Kundalini Yoga Kriya practices in them, and I highly recommend that you do those. I say to my clients, do these every day. I do them every day. I recommend that other people do them every day, because we want to be clear. Right? We want to be clear. And it's not only about clearing, it's also building your prana, building your energy, building your soul light. And when you fill your auric field more and more with your soul light, what happens is that you can stay sensitive, but you're protected. You're not at the mercy of other people's energy so much, because your field is so full of your own energy. And then what happens is it's like your field becomes sensitive like a drum, right? Like the skin of a drum, right, is sensitive. Well, your auric field becomes like that. And then you can connect with others through resonance, so that when you come in contact with somebody else with their emotional energy or any of their energy, you can kind of be like, how does that feel? And you're not bringing it into your field, and you're certainly not bringing it into your body. It's out there, but you're still able to feel it, and you can be like, okay, that feels pretty good. I'm gonna, yeah, all right. Or nah, not so much. I think I'm gonna keep my distance, right? And so you want to be able to develop that sensitivity. And like I said, it's nonverbal, it's not linear, it's not rational. Don't try to figure it out with your head, because it's not gonna make sense. Okay. But when you do get sensitive like that, it can be just a huge boon for you. Like I said, especially if you're one of those people who works with clients or that sort of thing. Okay, so I want to give you a practice that you can do in addition to the Kriya and energy practices that you can go and watch for, is a self-reflection exercise that you can do when you're alone and in a quiet state. And I'm just going to give you a series of questions here for you to be able to write about, like either at the end of your day, review your day, or the next morning, if you're more of a morning person, review your day before, so that you can start to get some perception of what kind of energy have you been around, what's yours, what's not yours, and so on. Anyway, let me just read you through this. So number one, what happened? Right? What happened during your day? Number two, how did you feel? Did you notice feeling differently emotionally, energetically at different points during the day? How do you feel now? Is it different than when you felt before, or the same? The same or different? Do you feel satisfied, or disappointed, or frustrated, or curious, or happy, or confused? Like, how have you felt? Try to put some words to that. But you can also talk about sensations, right? If it was like, my belly was really tight, right? Or my throat got really constricted. So you can also use sensations as well as naming what we think of as feelings or emotions. So practice tracking your experience, right? And then go add on to that, like, who are you around? What did it feel like to be around that person or those people or that situation? How did you respond or react? Did you get triggered, or were you able to, if something came up, were you able to just kind of take a few breaths and ground yourself, have the power of the pause, and just be like, okay, and not react, and just kind of have command of that energy and then process it later? right? Or were you able to respond? Were you able to have something that maybe in the past would have bothered you, but you've kind of evolved out of that, and you're like, oh, that doesn't even bother me anymore. Isn't that cool? Like, you want to take note of when those things happen for you, right? And so what was going on inside of you, right? Underneath the surface, right? Were you able to deal with somebody else's energy without taking it on? Were you able to receive somebody else's energy, at least on the outside of your field, in a way that felt really good to you? Like if you were sharing excitement, delight, surprise, wonder, with other people. And if so, what did you discover? Like if you were resonating with other people's energy, right? If you were resonating somehow, what did you discover? What did you learn? What kind of information came in for you? And what's of value there? Did you learn anything? Did you learn anything from them? Did you learn anything from yourself and how you responded to what was going on? Is there something you wish that you could do better next time, that maybe you kind of look at that and you have a little regret? Or did you feel at the mercy of other people's emotional energy? If so, what did you do, right? How did you handle that? Did you just beat it out there, or did you, kind of dig in your heels and be like, I'm just going to endure this, right? Did you fight back? Like what did you do, right? And again, you want to track that, because anytime you track something, you become more aware of it. Okay. And as soon as you become more aware of it, you gain more command over it. It's when things that are really subconscious and you don't know what's going on, that you're at the mercy of it. So you can be at the mercy of somebody else's energy, but you can also be at the mercy of your own energy. So for you to be able to have your open emotional solar plexus really be a superpower, an intuitive superpower. I had one reader say that that's the true empath, people with the open emotional solar plexus. I think that there are lots of places where people can be empathetic in the chart, but I understand that's a traditional human design thing, because we can really feel other people's emotional energy, but we want to do it in a way that we're not taking it into our bodies. I don't think that's healthy. Okay. So if you want to know more about emotions, you can check out a workshop that I have just done in my Becoming Sovereign Mighty network. And it's all about emotional wisdom and the emotional solar plexus. There's a little bit of overlap, but there's also a lot of additional material. And there's a lot more in there about emotional wisdom. So I'll put a link to that down in the description. All right. Many blessings. Much love. Bye for now.